Hi, I'm Dave Engelbretson, and along with Leroy Hyatt, we'd like to welcome you to another edition of Fly Tying, the Angler's Art. You know, Leroy, tonight you're going to show me three patterns that are not familiar to me, only by reputation. I've never tied them. I haven't seen them tied. You told me about two of them. You told me about the X-caddis, which is a trailing caddis version,
dry fly,
which I haven't seen, dry fly. Then we're going to tie the bird Stonefly Nymph. And of course, I'm well familiar with bird stonefly dry, but I didn't even know there was a nymph until you told me about it. So we'll see that one. Then we'll tie an absolutely fabulous streamer fly, the Clouser Minnow. And we'll have more to say about that when we get there. Why don't you tell me about the X-caddis and what are we going to use?
Okay, just three materials for this pattern. We'll use a light tan antron for the tail or trailing shuck. I'll use a little bit darker dubbing, a tan dubbing, to go for the body material. The head and the wing will be made from natural elk hair. And then I'll use a tan dry fly thread. The hook that we'll use will be a size 10. This fly does work best in size 10s and 12s.
And just a standard dry fly hook. It's not long shank.
No, just a standard dry fly. I pinched the barb down on it already.
You know, we might mention that we've always been saying we pinch the barb down, and that's a good thing to do for several reasons. Of course, the first and primary reason it makes releasing the fish easier. You can get that hook out of the fish easier, but I've got to say it also comes out of ears and shirts, and that's really important if you're fishing with Leroy. You want to be able to get those flies out of your back or your neck. And,
well, you know what the barb was originally for? All joking aside,
I do. That's true. Why don't you tell him? Yeah.
The barb was to hold the bait on. That's the only thing
the barb wasn't to help you hook the fish. It was to keep the worm or whatever you're using on there. Yeah.
All right, what I've done, I've just attached this antron tail to the rear, or shuck, as you will.
And I think it's important to mention that the reason for this antron is because of its light reflective properties.
That's correct, and it will really help the fly
float. Whether it's antron, which is a trilobal filament, or one of the other sparkly type yarns, it's important that you get that feature, not just standard yarn.
Standard yarn will not float this fly.
Well, plus the light reflection.
Yes. Now I'm going to dub a body. This is just a little bit darker tan. However, I've seen these flies tied in a lot of different colors. Just this particular one seems to work best for me.
Well, of course, we talk about the size, but there are a lot of different sizes and colors of caddis flies, too. And if you happen to live in an area of the country that where you're fishing a granum or something else, you'd want a dark olive or whatever the appropriate size and color would be.
I heard guys talk about this fly for a long time before I ever used it. Finally, I gave up and had to ask, what is an X-caddis? I'd never heard of it. They showed me the pattern. I said, well, good night. That's nothing more than an elk hair caddis.
With a trailing shuck.
With a trailing shuck, except this fly does not have any hackle. They said, try it. That's all they'd tell me. Well, the fly will float better, at least in my opinion, than the elk hair caddis, and I think it's because of that trailing shuck material.
Could be. Where does the X come from, I wonder?
I don't know. There's nothing X in there at all. I first thought they were talking about something with rubber legs.
Me too. When you talk about like the Madam X that has the rubber legs, that's what I assumed on this, but that's obviously not the case.
Not at all. Now this one, the wing, I'm going to make about the length of the shank of the hook. That way it's going to leave a little bit of that shuck material out. I'm going to go...
Have you got some sparkly stuff in your dubbing?
A little bit.
Because that dubbing itself really lights up.
It's called squirrel bright is what it is, but any dubbing would work for this. I'll just get that wing bound in.
Or if you're your own, you could probably
throw some in.
Stuff
you
in
bet.
There. Yeah.
I'll lift that wing case, I'll wrap a little bit in front, and then I'll get all these butts back out of the way. Then I'm going to run the scissors in till the bottom blade touches the eye of the hook. And then cut it off.
That's a little hard to see on the screen. Oh, I see.
Because if I do that, what it does is every fly I tie then will have that same length hair head on the front.
Well, that's a neat trick.
And I'll put a small whip finish on it. Get rid of that thread. And we'll put a drop of head cement on it. This is an absolute fly. The guys accuse me of not using this fly because I'm too old to change. Well, that could be, but it does really work. I would not fish any of the little streams around here that we normally fish without this fly anymore.
And you
Dynamite
prefer that
fly.
over the standard elk
I
hair?
prefer this over the standard elk hair.
Well, it's certainly even quicker to tie.
And no hackle.
No hackle, yeah.
No hackle
That's
at all.
what I mean.
Well, there's the X-caddis. Has the neutral or light tan antron tail. It has a dub body of tan. It has the natural color elk hair wing and head.
Now, as I said earlier, this bird Stonefly Nymph is another new pattern to me, and apparently it's supposed to represent the nymphal stage of a stonefly, where you would normally be using the adult version. And I suspect that's probably a good pattern tied in its normal, regular pattern for maybe the golden stone. So show me how you tie this thing.
All right, we'll use brown saddle hackle. We'll use a dark turkey biot section, which is just a turkey wing that's had the short strips.
Now, is that turkey or
cut.
goose?
I'm sorry, goose biot strips. We'll use a peacock herl for the thorax area. The body material will be ribbed with orange floss. The dubbing will be a dark brown. The wing case will be a mottled turkey. And we'll use a orange thread for this. Now, this fly can also be weighted. Just for time's sake tonight, I will not do it.
What hook are you using?
What hook? I'm using a 4X long size 10. They do come in much larger sizes than this too. I've seen them all the way down to a 4, which is an enormous stonefly, but for some of the large ones, they work very well.
So I assume that if you wanted a nymph for another stone pattern, you could use other colors.
I'm sure you could. This is just the regular one. It's a good impressionistic. Well, where'd that go? I cut it off, but I don't know where it went. I'll get a couple of these goose biots laid out here. I don't know why I'm calling them turkey.
Well, I suppose it's just the company you're working with.
Yeah, well, that could well be.
Yeah.
Now, this will have a natural curve to it. You can see it does kind of curve away, and that's the curvature that I want to go in that tail. I'm going to tie them in one at a time. I don't have good luck tying them in two at a time at all.
I'm glad to see that, because I always do it individually, and I didn't know if other people did it that way or not. But
a lot of times tying these, I need all the help I can get.
well, it helps you set them at the angles you want.
Oh, and I can pull them different lengths that I want.
Do you go between them at all then to separate
No, I
them
do
further?
not, because when they're in that natural curve state, they will go away from each other.
So you basically tie them in flat. Yeah.
Get rid of that. Now I'll take a piece of this orange floss. This will be the ribbing. And those stoneflies do have a pretty predominant rib, if you'll look at the abdomen of one. I'll get this tied in. This will become the rib. We'll get that bound down some more. And then we'll do the dubbing. Now, this will have a taper to it, a fairly steep taper.
You want the body fairly plump then?
Well, narrow toward the rear, but then going larger toward the thorax area, the wing case. So I will put just a little more dubbing on the thread than we did in the past, but not a great deal more. It's going to take probably twice loading the thread to get this up all the way up anyway.
Now, is that pretty much straight fur dubbing, or do you have some sparkle in there?
No, it's got a little bit of green and a little bit of red blended in with it, but that's definitely not a necessity. I'm going to go once behind that rib and then go forward.
Right. You know, this is something we've mentioned, blended dubbing, a lot, and one of these shows we're going to take time to talk about blending dubbing when we have a little more time, but you can take several different colors or several different materials and pluck them back and forth between your fingers to mix them, or throw them in a coffee grinder, kitchen blender. But we'll talk about that in more detail another time.
You never see a natural insect that's all one color.
Oh, no.
They are multiple colors, and the more we can do it that way, the more impressionistic that fly is.
Well, you know, when I'm shooting what I was going to say later, but as long as we got time while you're winding, you know, when a child does a painting, the tree's trunk is brown and the leaves are green and the flowers are red and yellow and the sky is blue, and those are the right colors, but it doesn't look realistic the way an artist would do it, with flecks of color and flecks of light. And
Sure.
This is what we're trying for in a blended dubbing, and it's much more effective.
Now I'm going to run this ribbing forward. You can see that really does make an impressionistic.
And with a nice tight body like you've got there, you don't have to counter wrap it either.
Not at all.
And it's probably better when you don't have to counter wrap it, because I think when you bind it down, it stays tighter with the natural direction that you've got there. Well, that gives a good segmented look.
Now I'm going to take a small section of this turkey, and I have sprayed this turkey with an art fixative. That will hold it more in place. A lot of times that turkey will have a tendency to split out real bad. This will keep it fairly well tight and together. Then I'll tie in the legs, which is the brown hackle, and then the thorax will be peacock. Now, depending on the peacock you have, you can a lot of times get away with 3 or 4, sometimes 5 strips of this, or hurls. I always do peacock from the tips. I'll cut those off straight, soft
That's
loop it in.
another trick I learned from you, and of course the reason is they're more flexible up
by
there,
far.
and you tend not to
And there's
break
more
them.
hurl instead of down
Sure.
here on the bottom where there isn't a great deal.
Now, you're going to wrap that around the
I'm
thread?
going to wrap it around the thread, make just a little
I
peacock
think
rope out of it.
That's a good trick. It makes a peacock chenille. It makes it thicker and
Very
bushier, but it also
durable.
binds it down so that it won't come
And it
apart
may
with
not
fish's
be that
teeth.
necessary up here in the front. The fish's tooth may not be as susceptible to getting in there.
Yeah, but it's just,
it's
it
a
makes
habit
nice,
I'm in.
A nice thick thorax,
Yes,
and
it does.
I just always do it.
Now here comes the legs. I'll just take about 2.5 turns of that. Now here you can either clip the top hackles off, like so, or you can just grab your thumb and finger and fold them down, whichever you're more
The nice
comfortable
part about
with.
clipping them is at least it makes them even. Sometimes the other way you get more coming out one side than the other. And I guess it depends on how fussy you are, but
Now I'll just fold that wing case over and clip it off. Get the legs out of the way and just build
and
a little
a
small
little trick
head
that we've
here.
mentioned before with other nymphs, if you want to go to the trouble before you clip that wing case off in front, the excess, you can take a dubbing needle and divide out one fiber on each side, clip out the middle part, and clip the others to length as antenna. And the fish don't care, but it's
Looks
kinda,
good
kinda
to
cute.
tire, you bet. And there's a bird stonefly nymph.
Why don't you
It
rotate
is-
that a little bit to
Okay.
just give us a top view of it too? Look at the legs, yeah.
It all
And
sticks
the
out.
tail,
You can see the
divided
tail is
tail.
divided.
What good looking nymph.
Now I'll put a little drop of head cement on it, and this one ought to be ready to go. You can also at the same time coat that turkey wing case if you want. And there's the bird stonefly. We use brown goose biots for the tail. The abdomen is a brown dubbing ribbed with orange floss. The thorax is peacock and with brown palmered hackle through it. The wing case is brown mottled turkey.
Now, I've really been looking forward to watching you tie this next one, Leroy. It's the Clouser Minnow. And this is got to be a dynamite pattern because so often on so many lists where people list their 10 favorite fly patterns, starting with Lefty Cray and going right down, I always see the Clouser Minnow on it. It has a reputation for catching big fish, and I think I know the reason for that. We'll mention that when we get into the tie. But it originally started out, incidentally, as a saltwater pattern for stripers and other saltwater fish. And then the freshwater fishermen picked up on it because they realized how effective it was. So why don't you tell us about the Clouser Minnow and what you're going to use to tie it?
Okay, this is just one variation and color of this Clouser Minnow. There are a lot of different ones out there. We'll use a black bucktail for the tail, body, and underwing. This also has a little dumbbell weighted eye. This particular eye is painted. It is predominantly black with a red center. And then again, part of the underwing will be this crystal flash. I'll use a standard thread of a 6/0. The hook I have in the vise, I've pinched the barb. It is a 4X long, size 6. And again, lots and lots of different colors
Well,
and
basically, you tie in
sizes.
different colors and sizes to match particular
Whatever
bait
you're
fish
wanting
or
to
whatever
do
you're
with it.
fishing
Sure,
for. And
sure.
trout fly would probably be different size than a striper fly.
Now I'm going to tie the eye on. What I'm going to do here is just figure 8. This eye in place.
Now, in preparation for this, you painted the eyes yourself. You didn't buy them that way.
No.
I know because you borrowed my paint to do it. You painted the basic eye black with a red pupil.
With a red pupil, yes. Now, this will take several wraps to get this bound in place where it's not going to rotate around. I do want it to stay on top of that hook.
Right. And what I often do is I hit it with a little of that quick-drying cement.
The Zap-A-Gap or something like that.
Zap-A-Gap or Crazy Glue or something like that. And that fixes it in position pretty well. And, of course, it dries almost instantly. So,
well, we'll see what happens with that. Now I'll go to the back of the hook with the thread. And we'll take a piece of this black bucktail. This will become the tail and the body section together. Now, I don't think it makes any difference whether you even this or not. Now, I have evened some of them I have not. I've just left it stick out as is.
About how long do you want that tail?
I want it about the length of the shank of the hook, maybe just slightly shorter, but not much. And I'm just going to take a quick wrap here, bind it down, the tail, and then I'm going to start forward. And I'll go over this. I want to keep that hair right on top of the hook shank. And then I'll go back over it again, just to make sure it's all nice and even. I've got a couple of real long ones here that I'm going to get rid of. I'll just break those out and nobody will ever know the difference. Now we've got the tail tied in place. Now what you do is fold these butt sections right between those eyes and tie it down in front. Cinch it down pretty good. I'm going to go forward slightly. Now you can't go too far forward because there's a lot of other material that goes in underneath there, and I want to get it all down even. Now I'll get rid of these butts.
Well, now that's interesting to me. So you really have the body is thread over the bucktail. It's a thread-type body. Are you going to coat that with something to make it so it doesn't snag and break?
Sure. I could coat it right now. I won't do it just because of the dry time for the glue.
Yeah.
Because what happens now, I want to rotate the fly over. Now, with the dumbbell eyes, this weight on top, the fly will immediately turn over in the water like that.
Sure.
So that's the way the fly will normally ride in the water.
I suspect this is why this fly is so famous for catching big fish, is those heavily weighted eyes. That fly is going to sink very quickly, and it lets you get down where the big fish are. And I know one technique that someone was just recently sharing with me, like on the Bow River, where they fish these little backwaters and these little slots, and they can drop that fly in at the head of a little depression, and it immediately sinks to the bottom, and then they strip it very quickly up out of the pool, and it looks like a bait fish trying to escape. And if there's a big brown laying there, odds are pretty good he's going to chase that thing.
He'll grab it. Now, I've taken a little bit of this crystal flash, and I'm going to tie it in on either side.
Ah. That's kind of an underwing then.
Kind of an underwing.
And it's probably important that they don't overdo the amount of that.
No. I only have 2 strands in this whole thing. And that's about right. It could be, you could put maybe 6 in it.
Yeah,
but you can
but you
see
want a
they kind of...
suggestion. You don't want a big, bright,
I don't want,
flaring light out there.
And now I'll come in and take another section of the bucktail.
I think a lot of people tend to overuse that
crystal flash
or flashaboo or any of those things. And I know I sometimes have a tendency to do that, and we want just a hint of brightness.
That's correct. I'll get rid of a few of these long ones right now. I'm going to lay that down and cut just a little bit more. I'd like that just a little heavier. And I'll get it all back together maybe.
So apparently if you were tying these in other colors, you would then use other color threads too, because it's basically the thread making the body. Now I didn't
well, it does keep that black bucktail body also, but
I didn't notice. Do you have those thread wraps tight against each other?
No, they're figure X. They're X'd all the way through.
Well, if that's the case, then I think it would certainly be helpful to put some of that rubber-based cement or something on there.
Yes, I agree.
And tie the number of flies up to that point and let them dry in between before you start working with the hair.
Now I'm going to put actually the overwing on now, even though this is the last wing to go on. I'm going to make it about the same length as the first clump that went on. I'm going to lay it right between those two eyes.
Now, you mean as long as the tail there?
As long as the tail, yes. And then I'll wrap backwards, or wrap toward the eye of the hook. And then I'm going to come in
towards the eye of the fly, but away from the eye of the hook.
Yes.
You're going to fold that back.
No, I'm not going to fold this back. It's going to stay right there. This will just become the actual wing itself.
I see.
I wrapped up a little bit closer to the eye.
Oh, I was a little disoriented. I'm trying to look at the monitor here, and I was a little disoriented. It already is angled back.
Yes, it is angled back, but I will not wrap over that section at all.
No.
And now I just finish all of this, gets wrapped down. This fly will come out with a fairly large head.
Which is fine on a minnow imitation.
For a minnow like this?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And just make sure it's all bound down nice.
Well, you can see where the weighted eyes, which are now on the bottom, actually on the top of the hook, are going to make that hook flip over and ride.
Yes, it will ride through the water exactly as it is right now.
It also puts the hook up where it's a little protected by the bucktail, which makes it a little weedless.
A little bit weedless, that's correct.
So it's a good deep water fly. It'll sink fast and get down where the big fish are. And if you're fishing in fairly shallow water, of course, you're going to have to strip that thing fairly quickly.
Oh, real quick, yes.
To keep it off the bottom. But that's fine because it gives the impression of an escaping bait fish.
But now you can see, as that goes through the water, you're going to see just a little bit of that flash go through it. I got one wrapped over the top here. I'll just pull it back out of the way. Now, this one, as with the steelhead flies, I would probably put at least 2 coats of head cement on. I want a nice shiny head here. I'll go ahead and run this on around. But I'm like you, Dave. I've read about this fly. I have read about it. I have not had the opportunity to fish it. I do think I'm going to have to try it.
Oh, I absolutely. Now that I know how to tie it, I'm going to have to use it.
But it just looks like when I say fish it, this fly I think would be extremely difficult to cast.
I was just going to mention that, bring that up, that you'd probably be lobbing it.
Just chuck and chance it.
Actually, that fly weighs more than a lot of the trout I catch.
Probably need a football helmet.
It's not going to be graceful, but there are casting techniques too that allow you to cast a heavy weight.
Just open the loop?
Well, that plus you can use that Belgian cast where you actually bring the fly in low below the rod tip and without stopping it make a big sweeping casting stroke. The problem with casting with a lot of weight on there is if you go to a normal casting stop where you stop.
Yes.
If you're going stop, stop, stop on the forward and back cast, that thing is you're going to need a hard hat. But if you can do any kind of an oval type cast, you can sling it out there.
Now what I've done, Dave, most of that wing material is underneath, so I'm just going to coat the whole thing with head cement. And that's the Clouser Minnow. We use black bucktail for the tail and body. We use black bucktail and crystal flash for the wing. The eyes are painted, which is an optional step, and they're barbell or dumbbell eyes.
Well, that's our show for this time. We've taken a look at 3 good flies, all new flies to me, as I said. We looked at the X-caddis, which I'm certainly going to have to try if it's as effective as you say it is.
It is, very.
We looked at the bird Stonefly Nymph, and we looked at this great steelhead, or great streamer fly, the Clouser Minnow. And I think that's a pattern that's going to have to be in every big trout fisherman's box.
I'm going to have to try
But also, I suspect smallmouth bass would hit that very well in rivers, and certainly saltwater in bigger sizes and colors. So, tie up some flies, and we'll see you next week. So long.
Dave and Leroy have produced a new 90-minute video on fly tying techniques. To order a copy, call the number on your screen. These tips are only $28.95 plus $3.95 shipping and handling. Please have your credit card ready and call 1-800-883-0124 to order fly tying techniques. You can also order the programs in this series. There are 3 programs on each 90-minute tape for $22.95 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-883-0124 and order your fly tying videos or the techniques tape.